Slavoj Žižek begins his philosophy by challenging one of the most comforting assumptions modern people hold about themselves, the belief that they are free, rational individuals who clearly understand their desires and make conscious choices within reality. Because for him, human beings are far stranger and far less transparent to themselves than they imagine, driven not only by visible thoughts and intentions, but by hidden structures of ideology, fantasy, contradiction, unconscious desire, and social systems operating beneath ordinary awareness, shaping perception long before individuals believe they are thinking independently. What makes his philosophy unsettling is that he does not treat ideology simply as political propaganda or explicit manipulation imposed from above. Ideology, for him, exists much deeper than slogans or party systems. It shapes the very framework through which people experience reality itself, organizing what feels normal, desirable, acceptable, or even imaginable. And because ideology functions through everyday habits, entertainment, language, culture, and unconscious assumptions, individuals often participate in it most completely when they believe they are acting freely and naturally. He argues that modern people misunderstand ideology because they assume that once individuals recognize manipulation intellectually, they become liberated from it. Yet he believes ideology persists precisely through this cynical awareness. People often know systems are contradictory, artificial, exploitative, or absurd, and still continue participating in them comfortably. A person may criticize consumer culture while remaining fully immersed within it, mock political systems while continuing to obey them automatically, or understand that happiness cannot be bought while endlessly pursuing consumption anyway. This contradiction fascinates him because it reveals that human beings are not guided purely by conscious belief. Individuals frequently act against what they consciously know, sustained by unconscious fantasies that organize desire and provide emotional stability. Fantasy, therefore, becomes central to his philosophy, not as simple imagination or escapism, but as the hidden structure allowing people to endure reality itself. Human beings require fantasies in order to maintain coherent identities and navigate the overwhelming complexity of existence. He draws deeply from psychoanalysis, especially the work of Jacques Lacan, to argue that desire itself is fundamentally unstable. People rarely desire objects directly for their practical value alone. Desire is shaped socially, symbolically, and psychologically. Individuals often desire things because others desire them, because society teaches them to associate certain objects or lifestyles with fulfillment, status, love, or meaning. And because of this, desire constantly moves from object to object without ever reaching complete satisfaction. This endless dissatisfaction becomes one of the defining features of modern existence. Consumer societies promise fulfillment continuously while ensuring desire never fully settles, because stable satisfaction would halt consumption itself. Individuals remain trapped in cycles of wanting, acquiring, disappointment, and renewed wanting, always sensing that the next achievement, relationship, experience, or possession might finally complete them. Yet fulfillment continually slips away because the emptiness driving desire cannot be permanently filled through external objects. For him, this emptiness is not an accidental flaw in human psychology, but part of the structure of subjectivity itself. Human beings are divided internally. They are never completely unified, transparent, or whole. Something remains missing at the center of identity, and people spend their lives trying to manage or conceal this lack through ideology, fantasy, romance, politics, religion, ambition, entertainment, or consumption. He rejects simplistic ideas of authenticity because he believes there is no pure inner self hidden beneath social roles waiting to be uncovered. Individuals are shaped through language, culture, unconscious drives, and symbolic systems long before they become self-aware. Even the sense of personal identity emerges within structures individuals did not create themselves. And this means human freedom is far more complicated than modern individualism usually assumes. Language itself becomes enormously important in his philosophy because language does not merely describe reality neutrally. It shapes reality by structuring perception and meaning. Once individuals enter language, they enter symbolic systems filled with rules, expectations, categories, and social codes that organize human experience. People do not simply use language freely. They are also used by it, shaped by inherited meanings that influence thought before conscious reflection even begins. At the same time, he insists reality itself can never be fully captured by language or ideology. Something always escapes symbolic systems, a traumatic excess resisting complete explanation or control. This unresolved dimension of existence repeatedly disrupts attempts to create perfectly coherent worldviews, and societies often react defensively to these disruptions by constructing fantasies that restore emotional stability and protect people from confronting deeper contradictions. Politics, therefore, becomes deeply connected to psychology within his thought because political systems do not survive merely through force or rational agreement. They survive because they organize desire and fantasy. People become emotionally attached to systems even when those systems harm them, because ideology offers not only explanations of reality, but also unconscious forms of enjoyment, identity, and stability that individuals fear losing. He is particularly critical of late capitalism because he sees it absorbing resistance itself into the system. Modern capitalism often allows rebellion, irony, criticism, and self-awareness as long as they remain contained within consumer culture and do not fundamentally disrupt economic structures. Individuals may feel radical or independent while continuing patterns that strengthen the very systems they claim to oppose, and this creates a strange condition where critique becomes commodified and rebellion itself turns into lifestyle performance. Modern society also concerns him because he believes people increasingly avoid confronting difficult realities directly. Instead of facing existential anxiety, contradiction, mortality, ecological crisis, or social conflict honestly, individuals often retreat into distraction, digital stimulation, ideological simplification, or endless entertainment designed to protect them from deeper confrontation with the instability of existence itself. He believes contemporary culture constantly pressures people to enjoy themselves, to optimize happiness, productivity, pleasure, and self-expression endlessly. Yet this command to enjoy paradoxically produces more anxiety, because enjoyment cannot function as permanent obligation. Individuals feel guilty not only for suffering, but even for failing to enjoy life sufficiently, creating a society filled with exhaustion masked by performance. Despite the complexity and darkness within his philosophy, he does not simply advocate despair or nihilism. He believes confronting contradiction honestly may open possibilities for genuine freedom, because illusions lose some of their unconscious power once exposed. True thinking begins not when individuals find comforting certainty, but when they become willing to face inconsistency, instability, and the uncomfortable gaps within both society and themselves. For him, genuine transformation requires more than superficial reform or personal self-improvement. It demands confronting the hidden fantasies sustaining systems of domination and questioning the structures shaping desire itself. And this process is difficult because people are often more attached to their illusions than they realize. Human beings may consciously complain about systems while unconsciously depending upon them psychologically for identity and orientation. Underneath all his reflections lies a vision of human existence as fundamentally conflicted, unstable, and incomplete, yet also capable of radical insight precisely because of this incompleteness. Human beings are not harmonious creatures moving naturally toward balance and peace. They are beings divided against themselves, searching for meaning within systems that both sustain and trap them. And philosophy therefore becomes not a source of comfort, but a confrontation with the strange and unsettling realities hidden beneath ordinary life. As his philosophy continues unfolding, he turns more intensely toward the strange relationship between enjoyment, suffering, and power, because he believes modern societies are governed not only through laws, institutions, or economic systems, but through the management of desire itself. And this makes domination far more complex than older forms of visible oppression. People are no longer controlled primarily by being told what they must sacrifice. Increasingly, they're controlled through promises of pleasure, self-expression, freedom, and enjoyment. And this creates a society where individuals often feel liberated while remaining deeply trapped within systems shaping their behavior unconsciously. He sees modern capitalism as uniquely effective because it adapts constantly to criticism. Earlier systems demanded obedience openly, but contemporary culture absorbs rebellion itself into the market. A person may reject consumerism while expressing that rejection through purchasable identities, aesthetics, entertainment, or lifestyle choices already anticipated by the system. Even dissatisfaction becomes profitable. Rebellion becomes fashion. Critique becomes branding. Resistance becomes another form of consumption. This creates what he sees as one of the defining paradoxes of modern life: the illusion that endless choice automatically produces freedom. Individuals are surrounded by choices everywhere: products, identities, opinions, entertainment, lifestyles. Yet beneath this abundance, many experience increasing anxiety and emptiness because choice alone cannot answer deeper existential questions. In fact, unlimited choice often intensifies uncertainty because people no longer know what genuinely matters. They become trapped endlessly optimizing themselves without any stable orientation beyond temporary desire. He believes modern individuals are exhausted not only physically, but psychologically because they are constantly pressured to construct and perform identities. Society increasingly demands that people enjoy work, enjoy relationships, enjoy self-improvement, enjoy social life, enjoy productivity, and even enjoy relaxation. And this pressure transforms enjoyment itself into obligation. The command to enjoy becomes oppressive precisely because authentic enjoyment cannot survive as forced duty. This is why he finds anxiety so central to contemporary existence. Human beings today are often less constrained externally than previous generations, yet internally more unstable, because traditional structures providing identity and meaning have weakened while nothing fully coherent has replaced them. Individuals drift between endless stimulation and hidden emptiness, searching for certainty within fragmented cultural systems that continuously produce desire without fulfillment. He draws again from psychoanalysis to explain this instability. Human beings, for him, are fundamentally divided creatures. Consciousness never fully controls itself because unconscious drives, fantasies, fears, and contradictions shape behavior beneath awareness. And this division means people often do not truly know why they want what they want. They may believe they pursue success, love, morality, or freedom rationally, while unconscious desires and social structures guide them invisibly. Fantasy, therefore, becomes necessary for maintaining psychic stability. Human beings cannot confront raw reality directly because reality itself contains contradictions, uncertainty, suffering, and meaninglessness that would become unbearable without symbolic frameworks organizing experience. Fantasy protects individuals from this chaos by giving coherence to existence, offering narratives through which people interpret themselves and the world. Yet fantasies also trap people because they conceal contradictions instead of resolving them. Political ideologies, romantic myths, national identities, consumer dreams, and social narratives all function partly by covering over instability and incompleteness, allowing people to continue functioning without confronting deeper tensions underneath society and within themselves. He becomes especially interested in how societies create enemies or external threats in order to preserve internal coherence. Groups often project fears, frustrations, and contradictions onto outsiders. imagining that social harmony would exist if only certain disruptive elements disappeared. Yet this fantasy hides the fact that conflict and instability originate within society itself, rather than merely arriving from outside. Hatred frequently reveals more about unconscious anxieties within a culture than about the enemies being blamed. This insight shapes his understanding of politics. He rejects simplistic political optimism because he believes every social order contains contradictions impossible to eliminate completely. Attempts to create perfectly harmonious societies often become dangerous precisely because they deny the complexity and antagonism built into human existence itself. Systems promising total unity frequently end by suppressing difference violently in order to preserve the illusion of coherence. At the same time, he also criticizes passive cynicism. Modern individuals often believe recognizing hypocrisy or corruption intellectually is enough, but for him, cynical awareness changes little if behavior remains the same. A person may mock ideology constantly while still participating in it fully. True transformation requires more than detached criticism. It requires confronting the unconscious attachments sustaining systems emotionally and psychologically. Cinema, popular culture, jokes, and entertainment fascinate him because he believes they reveal hidden structures of ideology more honestly than official political discourse. Films often expose collective fantasies, fears, desires, and anxieties operating beneath society's surface. And by analyzing these cultural products, he attempts to uncover what people unconsciously enjoy within systems they consciously criticize. Enjoyment itself becomes politically important in his philosophy because power often depends not merely on fear, but on forms of pleasure attached to identity and ideology. People remain loyal to systems partly because those systems provide emotional satisfaction, belonging, superiority, or unconscious enjoyment. And therefore political change becomes extremely difficult because individuals may resist giving up even harmful structures when those structures support psychological stability. He also reflects deeply on violence, recognizing that societies frequently focus only on visible violence while ignoring the hidden violence built into economic systems, language, institutions, and everyday social relations. A society may appear peaceful externally while producing immense suffering structurally through inequality, exclusion, alienation, or exploitation normalized so completely that people stop recognizing them as violence at all. Underneath all of this lies his belief that reality itself is incomplete and unstable. Human beings long for final certainty, harmonious identity, or permanent satisfaction. Yet these desires can never be fully achieved because incompleteness belongs to the structure of existence itself. Something always remains unresolved, missing, or contradictory, and attempts to erase this instability completely often produce destructive political and psychological consequences. As his philosophy deepens further, it becomes increasingly clear that he is trying to force individuals out of passive comfort and ideological sleep, not by offering reassuring answers, but by exposing the hidden contradictions shaping modern existence. Because only by confronting instability honestly can human beings begin thinking beyond the fantasies and systems quietly organizing their lives without their awareness. As his philosophy moves deeper into the contradictions of modern existence, he becomes increasingly fascinated by the strange ways human beings protect themselves from reality, because people rarely confront the world directly in its raw uncertainty. Instead, they construct symbolic frameworks, narratives, rituals, identities, and fantasies that make existence emotionally bearable. And these structures do not merely distort reality from the outside. They actively organize what reality feels like from within, shaping perception long before conscious thought begins. He argues that modern individuals often imagine themselves as highly rational and independent while remaining deeply governed by unconscious mechanisms they barely recognize. A person may believe they're making free choices while their desires, fears, and values have already been structured socially through culture, ideology, language, and fantasy. Freedom, therefore, becomes far more complicated than simply removing external restrictions, because internal structures continue guiding behavior invisibly. This is why he criticizes modern forms of self-improvement that promise individuals total control over themselves through productivity, positivity, optimization, or personal discipline. Such systems often present human beings as transparent machines capable of perfect management if only they work hard enough. Yet he believes this fantasy ignores the instability and contradiction built into subjectivity itself. Human beings are not coherent systems smoothly directed by conscious intention. They are fragmented creatures divided between competing desires, unconscious drives, and conflicting identities. He sees contemporary society becoming increasingly obsessed with performance. Individuals constantly curate themselves through social media, professional identity, political signaling, lifestyle choices, and emotional presentation, constructing versions of themselves designed for visibility and approval. And over time, many begin losing connection to any stable sense of inward experience because identity becomes inseparable from external performance. People no longer simply live. They continuously stage themselves. This endless performance produces exhaustion because maintaining identity becomes permanent labor. Modern individuals feel pressure to appear successful, attractive, productive, informed, socially aware, emotionally healthy, and constantly improving, and failure to meet these expectations creates anxiety and guilt. Even rest becomes difficult because rest itself is transformed into another activity that must be optimized and displayed properly. At the same time, he notices how modern culture encourages superficial transgression while avoiding deeper confrontation with systemic problems. People are often allowed symbolic rebellion, ironic humor, provocative aesthetics, or controlled forms of dissent because these expressions rarely threaten the underlying structure of society. In fact, controlled rebellion can strengthen systems by giving individuals the feeling of resistance without requiring meaningful transformation. He becomes especially critical of the idea that tolerance alone can solve social conflict, because he believes many forms of liberal tolerance simply avoid confronting deeper antagonisms existing within society. Surface politeness often conceals unresolved tensions related to inequality, identity, fear, and power. And by refusing to address these contradictions directly, societies allow resentment and instability to grow underneath official narratives of harmony. For him, conflict is not an accidental disturbance interrupting an otherwise balanced social order. Conflict belongs to the structure of political and human life itself. Every society contains contradictions that cannot be eliminated completely because human beings themselves are divided and inconsistent. Attempts to create perfectly harmonious systems usually fail because they deny this instability instead of working through it honestly. He also reflects on the nature of belief in modern society, observing that people frequently continue participating in rituals and systems they no longer fully believe in consciously. Individuals may act religiously without faith, politically without conviction, or socially without genuine emotional investment. Yet these rituals still structure reality and behavior. Belief often exists externally within practices themselves, rather than entirely inside conscious conviction. This leads him toward one of his most unsettling insights: that individuals may obey ideology precisely through distance and irony rather than through sincere devotion. A cynical person who mocks systems constantly may still reinforce those systems perfectly through everyday participation. Awareness alone does not liberate people because unconscious enjoyment and habit continue operating beneath conscious criticism. He repeatedly returns to the idea that human beings desire not simply pleasure, but structured desire itself. People often become attached to dissatisfaction because desire depends upon incompleteness. Once an object is fully obtained, desire frequently fades or shifts elsewhere, revealing that what individuals pursued was not stable fulfillment, but the movement of desire itself. Consumer culture exploits this endlessly by keeping people permanently chasing satisfaction without allowing completion. This perpetual dissatisfaction contributes to what he sees as a deep loneliness within modern civilization. Despite constant communication and digital connection, many individuals feel increasingly isolated because relationships themselves become mediated through performance, consumption, and fragmented attention. Human contact grows more superficial, while existential insecurity deepens underneath the surface of everyday life. Yet he does not simply advocate pessimism. He believes confronting contradiction directly may create the possibility for genuine thought, because illusions lose power once recognized structurally rather than merely criticized superficially. Philosophy, for him, should disturb comfort rather than reinforce it. Real thinking begins when individuals encounter inconsistencies they cannot easily resolve and are forced beyond familiar ideological frameworks. He admires moments where reality disrupts fantasy unexpectedly, moments of crisis, failure, trauma, or contradiction where ordinary narratives stop functioning smoothly and deeper truths briefly emerge. Such moments are painful because they expose instability beneath everyday life. Yet they also contain transformative potential because they reveal that existing systems are neither natural nor inevitable. As his reflections deepen further, his philosophy becomes less about providing solutions and more about teaching individuals how to confront discomfort without immediately escaping into comforting illusions. Human beings instinctively seek certainty, coherence, and emotional security. Yet reality continually resists complete stabilization, and maturity therefore requires the capacity to endure ambiguity rather than covering it endlessly with fantasies designed to protect the self from anxiety. In the end, his vision of modern existence becomes profoundly unsettling but also strangely liberating because he insists that incompleteness, contradiction, and instability are not failures to overcome entirely, but fundamental conditions of being human. And only by acknowledging these conditions honestly can individuals begin freeing themselves from the unconscious structures quietly shaping their desires, identities, and understanding of reality itself. As his philosophy reaches its final depth, everything returns to the unsettling realization that human beings are far less transparent to themselves than they imagine. People believe they understand their desires, beliefs, and choices clearly. Yet beneath conscious awareness exist hidden structures of fantasy, ideology, fear, and contradiction shaping reality silently from within. Society does not control individuals only through force or laws, but through the unconscious frameworks that teach people what to desire, fear, admire, and pursue before they even begin questioning themselves. He believes modern life constantly encourages distraction from this truth. Endless entertainment, consumption, digital stimulation, and self-performance keep individuals occupied while preventing deeper confrontation with the instability at the center of existence. People chase happiness, success, identity, and fulfillment endlessly, yet satisfaction never fully arrives because desire itself is structured around absence and incompleteness. Something always feels missing, and modern systems survive by promising that the next achievement or purchase will finally close this gap. Yet for him, this gap can never disappear completely because incompleteness belongs to human existence itself. Individuals are divided beings, never fully unified, never fully satisfied, never entirely certain of themselves, and attempts to create perfect harmony through ideology, politics, consumption, or identity ultimately fail because reality always contains contradiction resisting total control. This is why he distrusts simple optimism as much as passive cynicism. Blind hope ignores the tensions shaping society, while cynical awareness often changes nothing because people continue participating in the systems they mock. Genuine thought requires something more difficult: the willingness to confront uncomfortable contradictions without immediately escaping into comforting illusions. He believes philosophy should disturb rather than reassure. Its task is not to provide emotional comfort or final certainty, but to expose the hidden assumptions organizing ordinary life and reveal how deeply ideology shapes perception itself. True freedom, therefore, begins not when individuals discover perfect answers, but when they become capable of recognizing the unconscious structures influencing their desires, fears, and understanding of reality. In the end, his philosophy leaves behind a vision of human existence as unstable, conflicted, and unfinished. Yet precisely within this incompleteness lies the possibility of genuine thought, because once individuals stop searching for perfect certainty and begin confronting contradiction honestly, they may finally start seeing both themselves and the world with greater clarity than ideology normally allows. Most philosophers try to make the world feel more understandable. Slavoj Žižek does the opposite. He pulls people into the uncomfortable realization that modern society may be far stranger, more irrational, and more psychologically manipulated than it appears on the surface. At first encounter, Žižek can seem chaotic. He jumps rapidly between philosophy, movies, politics, psychoanalysis, pop culture, jokes, ideology, consumerism, violence, desire, and fear. He speaks in contradictions, interruptions, and strange examples that often leave people confused. But beneath the chaotic surface is a thinker obsessed with one central question: why do human beings continue participating in systems they know are deeply flawed? This question sits at the center of almost everything Žižek explores. Why do people complain endlessly about modern society while continuing to obey its rules? Why do individuals recognize manipulation yet still participate in it? Why do people claim to desire freedom while remaining emotionally attached to systems, making them miserable? And perhaps most disturbing of all, what if human beings do not actually want the truth as much as they claim? Žižek's philosophy begins from a psychologically unsettling idea. Human beings are not purely rational creatures who simply follow logic and facts. Much of human behavior is shaped by unconscious desires, fantasies, fears, social rituals, emotional attachments, and invisible ideological structures people barely notice controlling them. This immediately separates Žižek from more optimistic views of human nature. Modern society often imagines people as independent individuals freely making rational choices. Žižek believed this image is partly an illusion. People are shaped long before they become conscious of themselves. They inherit language, culture, values, fears, fantasies, identities, political assumptions, social expectations, and desires from the system surrounding them. Even the things people believe they freely choose are often already influenced by ideology at levels they cannot fully see. This was why Žižek became deeply influenced by psychoanalysis, especially the work of Jacques Lacan. Freud had already argued that human beings are driven partly by unconscious desires hidden beneath conscious awareness. Lacan expanded this idea further, arguing that human identity itself is unstable and fragmented. Žižek took these ideas and applied them not only to individuals, but to entire societies. He believed modern civilization functions through collective fantasies people unconsciously depend upon emotionally. These fantasies help societies maintain stability even when reality itself becomes contradictory or painful. For example, people may openly criticize capitalism while still emotionally investing themselves completely inside consumer culture. Individuals complain about work consuming their lives while simultaneously measuring their self-worth through productivity and achievement. Citizens distrust political systems, yet continue participating in them almost automatically. Žižek became fascinated by this strange split inside modern consciousness. People often know more than they admit consciously, yet continue behaving as though they do not know it. This creates a form of social cynicism deeply characteristic of modern life. In older societies, ideology often worked through direct belief. People genuinely believed political myths, religious structures, or national narratives absolutely. But Žižek argued modern ideology functions differently. Many individuals already know systems are manipulative, unequal, or absurd, yet they continue participating anyway. Why? Because ideology is not simply about what people consciously believe. It is embedded in daily rituals, habits, desires, social structures, entertainment, language, and unconscious emotional investments. People participate in ideology not merely because they're deceived intellectually, but because systems become woven into identity and psychological comfort itself. This is why Žižek believed modern consumer society is psychologically powerful in ways many people underestimate. Consumer culture does not merely sell products. It sells fantasies about identity, happiness, belonging, rebellion, sexuality, individuality, and fulfillment. Advertising rarely focuses only on practical usefulness. Instead, it attaches emotional meaning to objects. Buy this and become desirable. Buy this and become successful. Buy this and become authentic. Modern capitalism, in Žižek's view, is extraordinarily effective because it absorbs even rebellion itself into consumption. People express individuality through products already created by the system they believe they are resisting. Even anti-establishment identity can become commodified. This creates a strange feeling many people experience in modern life without fully understanding it. A sense that even personal identity increasingly feels performative and commercialized. Individuals become brands of themselves. Social interaction becomes tied to image management. Authenticity itself becomes difficult to separate from performance. Žižek believed this constant performance creates deep psychological anxiety. Modern individuals are pressured to enjoy life constantly, to optimize themselves endlessly, to appear unique, successful, attractive, politically aware, emotionally fulfilled, socially validated, and productive all at once. Society no longer controls people only through repression. Increasingly, it controls through demands for enjoyment and self-realization. And this creates exhaustion. People become trapped chasing lifestyles and identities that never fully satisfy because the system depends on perpetual dissatisfaction. Consumer desire must constantly renew itself to keep functioning. Satisfaction is temporary by design. This was one reason Žižek believed modern society produces enormous underlying anxiety despite material abundance. People are surrounded by stimulation and choice, yet often feel internally fragmented and emotionally disconnected. Underneath entertainment, productivity, social media performance, political outrage, and endless distraction, many individuals quietly experience emptiness they struggle to explain. Žižek saw this emptiness as deeply connected to modern ideology itself, because ideology does not simply hide reality from people. Sometimes ideology protects people from confronting deeper truths about themselves and society that feel psychologically unbearable. One of Slavoj Žižek's most unsettling ideas is that human beings often do not really want liberation in the simple way they imagine. People speak constantly about freedom, authenticity, and breaking away from oppressive systems. Yet many remain deeply emotionally attached to the very structures they criticize. Žižek believed this contradiction reveals something uncomfortable about human psychology. People do not merely obey systems because they are forced to. Often they derive unconscious enjoyment from the systems controlling them. This idea sounds strange at first, but it became central to Žižek's understanding of ideology. Human beings frequently participate in behaviors they consciously dislike because those behaviors still provide emotional structure, identity, stability, or hidden forms of satisfaction. A person may complain endlessly about work culture while organizing their entire self-worth around professional achievement. Someone may criticize consumerism while emotionally relying on shopping, brands, or online identity for validation. Individuals may reject toxic social systems publicly while unconsciously fearing what would happen if those systems truly disappeared. This is why Žižek argued ideology survives not simply through lies imposed from above, but through unconscious emotional investment from below. People become attached to routines and fantasies because they help organize reality psychologically. Even suffering can become familiar enough that individuals fear losing it. Žižek explored this through psychoanalysis, especially Lacan's idea that human desire is inherently unstable. According to Lacanian thought, people rarely desire objects purely for their practical value. Desire is shaped socially. Individuals want things partly because those things symbolize status, identity, recognition, or emotional fulfillment. But the disturbing part is this: desire never fully settles. The moment people achieve what they thought would satisfy them, another longing often appears immediately afterward. A new goal, a new fantasy, a new insecurity. Modern consumer culture exploits this endlessly by constantly generating fresh desires and new forms of dissatisfaction. Žižek believed capitalism functions not merely by fulfilling needs, but by manufacturing endless psychological craving. This creates a society where people are trapped chasing fulfillment that never fully arrives. Success feels temporary. Pleasure fades quickly. Identity becomes unstable. Individuals constantly reinvent themselves, trying to reach some imagined state of completion that remains permanently out of reach. And this endless pursuit produces deep anxiety. Modern individuals are expected to enjoy life constantly, not merely survive, but optimize themselves endlessly. Society pressures people to become successful, attractive, productive, emotionally intelligent, socially visible, politically aware, sexually fulfilled, physically healthy, and personally unique all at once. For Žižek, this pressure creates a strange form of modern exhaustion. Older forms of authority often controlled through strict prohibition. Modern society increasingly controls through commands to enjoy. Be happy, be fulfilled, be passionate, be authentic, build your perfect identity. And when people fail to achieve this impossible ideal, they often blame themselves rather than questioning the system producing the pressure. This is one reason Žižek became fascinated by popular culture and film. He believed movies often reveal unconscious ideological fantasies more honestly than political speeches do. Hollywood stories repeatedly reproduce fantasies about love, heroism, power, masculinity, rebellion, and happiness that shape how people unconsciously understand reality. Even entertainment becomes ideological, not because audiences are simply brainwashed, but because films and media help organize emotional expectations about what life is supposed to feel like. What romance should feel like. What success should feel like. What freedom should feel like. Žižek argued that many individuals experience reality itself through cinematic fantasies without fully realizing it. This creates a painful gap between lived existence and imagined fulfillment. Real life feels disappointing partly because people unconsciously compare it against fantasies produced by media and culture. At the same time, Žižek rejected simplistic moralizing about capitalism or ideology. He distrusted easy political certainty because he believed human beings are psychologically far more contradictory than most ideological movements admit. People often desire things that undermine their own happiness. Societies contain irrational emotional forces beneath rational political language. This was why Žižek constantly returned to contradiction. Civilized societies contain hidden violence beneath politeness. Freedom contains anxiety. Pleasure contains dissatisfaction. Ideologies claiming liberation can become oppressive. Attempts to eliminate conflict often create new forms of domination. For Žižek, human existence itself is fundamentally unstable. And modern society works desperately to cover over this instability through distraction, consumption, entertainment, and ideological fantasy. But beneath all these distractions remains a deeper human confrontation with emptiness, uncertainty, mortality, and desire that no system can fully eliminate. As Slavoj Žižek became more globally famous, many people struggled to understand whether he was primarily a philosopher, cultural critic, psychoanalyst, political theorist, or provocateur. In reality, he deliberately blurred these boundaries because he believed modern reality itself had become fragmented and psychologically confusing. Traditional philosophy often tried to present clean systems and stable conclusions. Žižek distrusted neat certainty. He believed the modern world is filled with contradictions people desperately try to avoid confronting. This is why his style often feels chaotic. He jumps suddenly from Hollywood films to political violence, from jokes to deep philosophical analysis, from everyday behavior to abstract psychoanalysis. At first, this can seem random, but beneath it is a consistent method. Žižek tries to expose the hidden fantasies organizing ordinary life. Because according to him, people rarely experience reality directly. They experience reality through symbolic frameworks already shaping perception before conscious thought even begins. Language, media, politics, culture, religion, social rituals, entertainment, and ideology all influence how individuals interpret the world. Human beings like imagining themselves as independent rational thinkers. But Žižek believed much of consciousness is structured unconsciously through systems inherited from society. And this becomes especially dangerous during political crises. Žižek repeatedly warned that modern societies often misunderstand how authoritarianism emerges. People imagine tyranny arriving openly and dramatically, but ideology frequently spreads through fear, emotional manipulation, resentment, nationalism, humiliation, and fantasies of restoring lost greatness. When societies become anxious or unstable, many individuals begin craving certainty more than freedom. This was one reason Žižek remained deeply interested in violence and political extremism, not because he celebrated them, but because he believed civilized societies often hide enormous tensions beneath everyday normality. Economic inequality, alienation, loneliness, racial tension, ideological conflict, ecological anxiety, and emotional frustration can quietly accumulate beneath the surface for years. Then suddenly society appears shocked when eruptions of rage or authoritarianism emerge. But Žižek argued the conditions were already present long before the explosion became visible. He also believed modern liberal societies often struggle to confront deeper structural problems because consumer culture encourages endless distraction. People remain occupied with entertainment, online outrage, productivity, identity performance, and personal optimization, while larger systemic forces continue shaping their lives invisibly. This creates a strange psychological condition where individuals feel overwhelmed yet politically passive at the same time. Many people sense something is fundamentally wrong with modern life, but they struggle to imagine alternatives. They criticize systems constantly while continuing to participate in them every day because modern ideology often makes existing reality appear inevitable. Žižek believed this inability to imagine alternatives creates a form of psychological paralysis. It becomes easier to imagine environmental collapse, social fragmentation, or technological catastrophe than to imagine entirely different economic or political systems. Society begins feeling trapped inside structures everyone complains about, but nobody fully escapes. And beneath all of this, Žižek believed human beings remain deeply divided internally. People want freedom, but also security. They want authenticity, but also social approval. They want pleasure, but often sabotage their own happiness. They want truth, but frequently cling to comforting illusions. This inner contradiction fascinated Žižek. because he believed modern ideology survives precisely by managing these psychological tensions rather than eliminating them. In many ways, his philosophy forces people to confront a disturbing possibility. Perhaps the greatest forms of control are not the ones people openly fear. Perhaps the most powerful systems are the ones individuals unconsciously participate in every day while believing they are acting freely. In the later years of his career, Slavoj Žižek became one of the most recognizable and controversial philosophers in the world, but what made him endure was not simply his strange personality or provocative style. Beneath the jokes, interruptions, and chaotic lectures was a thinker trying to force modern people to confront realities they constantly avoid through distraction, ideology, and entertainment. Because Žižek believed something deeply unsettling about modern civilization. Human beings are surrounded by more information than ever before, yet this does not necessarily bring clarity or wisdom. In many ways, it creates confusion, emotional overload, fragmentation, and passivity. People consume endless streams of news, outrage, opinions, advertisements, identities, and digital performances until reality itself begins feeling unstable. And in this instability, ideology becomes even more powerful. Not because people blindly believe obvious lies, but because modern ideology often works through cynicism itself. Many individuals already know political systems are manipulative, media narratives are selective, corporations exploit desire, and social identities are partially constructed. Yet they continue participating anyway because daily life itself remains organized around these systems. This was one of Žižek's darkest insights. People can recognize illusion intellectually while remaining emotionally dependent on it. A person may mock consumer culture while still using consumption to regulate insecurity and identity. Someone may criticize social media while emotionally craving validation from it. Entire societies may distrust political institutions while continuing rituals of participation because imagining life outside the system feels psychologically impossible. For Žižek, this revealed that ideology is not simply false belief. It is woven into habits, fantasies, desires, routines, and emotional structures shaping ordinary existence. And this is why he believed modern freedom is far more complicated than people assume. Contemporary societies often present individuals with enormous choice, but endless choice does not automatically create genuine liberation. In fact, too much choice can produce anxiety, paralysis, and emotional exhaustion. People become trapped constantly constructing and reconstructing identities, careers, beliefs, lifestyles, and public images while feeling increasingly unstable underneath. Modern individuals are expected not only to survive, but to endlessly optimize themselves. Be more productive, be more attractive, be more unique, be more successful, be healthier, be happier, be politically conscious, be emotionally fulfilled. The pressure never ends. Žižek believed this constant demand creates a hidden form of psychological violence because individuals begin experiencing themselves as permanent projects requiring continuous improvement. Failure no longer feels temporary. It begins feeling personal and existential. And yet beneath all this pressure remains a deeper emptiness modern society struggles to confront honestly. Loneliness spreads despite hyperconnectivity. Anxiety spreads despite material abundance. Depression spreads despite endless entertainment. People increasingly sense that something essential about human life has become fragmented, commercialized, or emotionally hollow. Žižek argued that modern capitalism survives partly by transforming even dissatisfaction itself into fuel for consumption. Rebellion becomes style. Authenticity becomes branding. Political outrage becomes spectacle. Personal identity becomes marketable performance. Nothing remains fully outside the system because the system absorbs resistance itself. This was why Žižek often sounded pessimistic, but his philosophy was not simple despair. In many ways, He believed confronting uncomfortable truths is the beginning of genuine freedom. A society trapped entirely inside comforting illusions becomes psychologically incapable of meaningful change. He wanted people to stop hiding from contradiction, to recognize that human beings are not purely rational creatures, to recognize that desire itself is unstable, to recognize how deeply ideology shapes perception, to recognize the emotional fantasies hidden beneath politics, entertainment, nationalism, consumerism, and even personal identity. Because only by confronting these hidden structures honestly can individuals begin separating authentic thought from unconscious social conditioning. And perhaps this is why Žižek continues to fascinate people across the world. Not because he provides simple answers, but because he makes modern life feel suddenly strange again. He forces people to notice the invisible psychological mechanisms shaping ordinary existence every day. The rituals, the fantasies, the contradictions, the quiet forms of manipulation hidden inside systems that appear normal. His philosophy leaves listeners with an unsettling realization. Human beings may not be nearly as free, rational, or self-aware as they like to imagine. But it also leaves behind another possibility. That genuine freedom might begin the moment a person becomes willing to look directly at the illusions organizing their life instead of endlessly escaping into them.